Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, October 29th, 2024. All right, so first thing, it is still our fundraiser, and we are trying to wrap this thing up by Election Day. Not sure if we're going to make that deadline or not yet. But if you like this show, if you read antiwar.com, we are 100% reader funded. It's how we're able to provide you with the content that we do. So if you have the means, please go to antiwar.com/donate to help us out. Different types of donations, credit card, PayPal, cryptocurrency. If you're a Bitcoin millionaire, you just need to throw us one Bitcoin and we'll be good. Even just half a Bitcoin at this point would finish things up. So help us out, antiwar.com/donate. All right, so the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Israeli Knesset passes bill to ban UNRWA. So the Israeli Knesset on Monday passed a bill banning the UN's Palestinian Relief Agency, UNRWA, from operating inside Israel, and another bill that will severely limit its ability to operate in Gaza and the West Bank. The legislation is expected to take effect in 90 days. So the first bill banning UNRWA in Israel passed in a vote of 92-10. The second bill, aimed at ending UNRWA's operations in the Israeli-occupied territories, passed in a vote of 97-9. So strong support for both of these bills. So the second bill prohibits Israeli authorities from having any contact with UNRWA, making it impossible for the relief agency to coordinate with the Israeli military on aid deliveries. The legislation does not outline any plan to replace UNRWA's relief efforts in Gaza, which millions of Palestinian civilians rely on to survive. At this point, the whole population is reliant on this aid to survive, and they're barely surviving at that. Israel has waged war against UNRWA over the past year, killing over 200 of its staff members inside Gaza. Israel has claimed a significant number of UNRWA's staff are members of Hamas, but has offered no evidence for these allegations, which have been strongly rejected by the UN agency. So the U.S. took Israel's claims about UNRWA at face value and cut off funding to the agency at the beginning of the year. Now the U.S. is warning Israel against implementing the bills banning UNRWA since it would starve Palestinian civilians. State Department spokesman Matt Miller said ahead of the Knesset vote, quote, "If UNRWA goes away, you will see civilians, including children, including babies, not be able to get access to food and water and medicine that they need to live. We find that unacceptable. We continue to urge the government of Israel to pause the implementation of this legislation. We urge them not to pass it at all, and we will consider next steps based on what happens in the days ahead," end quote. So again, this was right before the vote that Miller said that. There's no reason to think the U.S. is going to put any real pressure on Israel over this. So UNRWA was formed in 1949 to provide aid to the about 700 to 750,000 Palestinians who were displaced when the State of Israel was founded in 1948, an ethnic cleansing known as the Nakba to the Palestinians. And today, Israeli officials, including ministers in the current government, are calling for a new Nakba. That is explicitly what May Golan, who's a Likud minister, she's the social equality minister. She called for a new Nakba at that Resettled Gaza conference recently. This is what they're calling. They want the Palestinians out of there, and they're imposing this starvation siege right now on northern Gaza to forcibly displace the Palestinians who are there. So this is what this is all about, is they want the Palestinians out of there, and if they don't leave, they want to kill or starve them. All right, so the next one here, Israeli forces kill 96 Palestinians in Gaza over 48 hours. So Gaza's health ministry said Monday that Israeli forces killed at least 96 Palestinians and wounded 277 over the previous 48-hour period. So they didn't put out the update on Sunday, so this covered 2 days. And this has brought the health ministry's death toll to 43,020 and the number of wounded to 101,110. So the death toll has crossed 43,000. The ministry wrote on Telegram, quote, "There are still a number of victims under the rubble and on the streets, and ambulance and civil defense crews cannot reach them," end quote. So the number does not include those missing under the rubble. And again, as we always mention, the American healthcare workers who volunteered in Gaza, they estimate over 118,000 people have actually been killed. And that includes over 60,000 that they believe have starved to death already. So medical sources told Al Jazeera, and look at this picture, just horrific, a little girl with a pretty serious wound to her foot there. This is every day, children being killed and maimed. Medical sources told Al Jazeera that at least 32 people were killed by Israeli strikes on Monday, including 15 in northern Gaza, where the Israeli military is attempting to carry out this ethnic cleansing campaign and has imposed a full siege, which has entered its fourth week. So the Israeli siege on northern Gaza has focused on the Jabalia refugee camp and areas around it. The Palestinian Civil Emergency Service said Monday that 100,000 Palestinians were trapped in Jabalia, Bet Lahia, and Bet Hanun without medical or food supplies. So nothing is getting into them. In another statement, Gaza's health ministry said that Israeli military operations were disrupting efforts to vaccinate children for polio. They said, quote, "The Israeli occupation is trying to abort the polio vaccination campaign by all means, preventing the campaign teams from reaching northern Gaza and placing obstacles to its implementation in Gaza City as well. Accordingly, the campaign is at risk of failure, which means the continued existence of the polio epidemic, which will not only threaten Gaza, but also threaten the entire surrounding area," end quote. So the slaughter continues in Gaza. The next one here, Gaza ceasefire talks resume in Qatar, but progress is not expected. So on Monday, officials from the U.S., Israel, Egypt, and Qatar resumed talks on a Gaza ceasefire in Doha, but no progress is expected to be made toward a resolution ahead of the U.S. presidential election on November 5th, which is just 1 week away. Sources told the New York Times that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is waiting to see who will succeed President Biden before making any diplomatic commitments. Netanyahu has also made clear that he has no intention of ending the genocidal war on Gaza, repeatedly saying that he would only agree to a temporary truce that would allow Israel to resume military operations. Hamas's position has been that any deal must include a permanent ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, but Netanyahu has insisted on keeping troops in Gaza, and his demand to maintain control of the Philadelphia corridor on the Gaza-Egypt border sabotaged the last round of negotiations. Earlier this month, Haaretz reported that the Israeli government was not interested in new ceasefire talks and was instead focused on pursuing the annexation of portions of Gaza. And that's what I think the purpose of the ethnic cleansing campaign in northern Gaza is, so they can annex that territory, build new Jewish settlements. So since that report from Haaretz, the killing of Sinwar, of Hamas's political leader, that prompted the U.S. to say, all right, let's restart negotiations here. And Israel has agreed to hold these talks, but there's no sign that Netanyahu is thinking about ceasefire right now. I think he's just trying to placate the Biden administration for the moment. Since Sinwar was killed, seems like things have just escalated in both Gaza and Lebanon, just continue to hit everywhere very hard. And then, of course, the attack on Iran. So we will see, again, I really don't doubt. I don't expect any progress, especially before the election. And then after the election, who knows what's going to happen with everything. All right, so the next one here, ICJ genocide case. South Africa files 750-page evidence against Israel. This one is from Middle East Eye. So South Africa on Monday filed a detailed submission to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, outlining evidence of Israel's alleged violation of the 1948 Genocide Convention in its ongoing war on Gaza. According to the South African presidency, the submission, also called a memorial, includes 750 pages of evidence of acts of genocide and genocidal intent. A statement by the presidency said, quote, "The evidence will show that undergirding Israel's genocidal acts is the special intent to commit genocide, a failure by Israel to prevent incitement to genocide, to prevent genocide itself, and its failure to punish those inciting and committing acts of genocide, end quote. It added that the evidence is presented in more than 750 pages of text, in addition to over 4,000 pages of annexes. It said, quote, South Africa's memorial is a reminder to the global community to remember the people of Palestine, to stand in solidarity with them and stop the catastrophe. The devastation and suffering has been possible only because, despite the ICJ and numerous UN bodies' actions and interventions, Israel has failed to comply with its international obligations, end quote. And it's been made possible by continued U.S. military aid. The submission may not be made public in accordance with the rules of the court, said the presidency. Israel will have a deadline of July 28th, 2025 to file a response known as a counter memorial. So that is a long way off. So any decision on this is not expected to happen for a long time. All right, so the next one here, Israeli attacks kill 60 across East Lebanon. This is from Jason Ditz. So Israeli airstrikes against Lebanon have escalated dramatically in recent days, and nowhere more than the eastern Bekaa Valley, where the governor of Baalbek described this as the most violent day they've seen since the beginning of Israel's invasion. The overall death toll continues to rise, but right now the reckoning is at least 60 people have been slain in strikes against multiple cities and towns in the area throughout Monday. A number of children were reportedly among the slain. So huge Israeli airstrikes in eastern Lebanon here. The largest attack was in Al-Laq, where 16 people were killed. The national news agency said the overall death toll there is expected to rise even more. So this number of 60 is probably going to go up. It seems like they're hitting it really hard. And a lot of times with these strikes, it doesn't become clear, for a couple days, exactly the damage. Because they've been leveling buildings and the rescuers have to dig through the rubble. And Israel's also been targeting the rescuers, which has made, the rescue efforts that much more difficult. All right, so the next one here, 7 killed by Israeli strikes on the Lebanese coastal city of Tyre. This is another article from Jason Ditz. So last week, Israel started its bombing campaign of the ancient historic city of Tyre along the southern Lebanese coast. The attacks hit areas close to the UN World Heritage Site in the city, which includes an ancient Phoenician city and Roman ruins. Monday morning saw a new round of attacks by Israeli warplanes with an immediate evacuation order issued for central Tyre, and airstrikes started almost immediately. The attacks killed at least 7 people and wounded 17 others. Israel has been issuing lots of broad evacuation orders, and on Monday, Tyre was unusual in its specificity as it ordered residents to flee north to the area beyond the Al-Ali River. And, these areas where they're telling them to go are also under Israeli attacks. So fleeing north or even fleeing outside of the evacuation orders is no guarantee of safety. Just on Sunday, Israel attacked the nearby town of Haret Saida, killing 9 civilians, including a child, despite that town not being inside any evacuation zone. And of course, this is something we've seen happen in Gaza all along. So Israel's military is offering rare comments on their new Tyre strikes, claiming that the city is a major Hezbollah stronghold and that there are Hezbollah compounds across the city. They insisted the attacks targeted buildings used by Hezbollah members and observation posts. Israel offered no evidence of these claims, though of course it would be difficult to disprove that random buildings hit in a city full of displaced people have never been used by a member of Hezbollah, basically saying this is very broad claims that Israel is making here. All right, so the next one here, this story is really something. Israeli soldier eulogized for killing Palestinians. So an Israeli soldier who was killed in Lebanon was fondly remembered at his funeral for his desire to take revenge against Palestinian women and children in Gaza, and this was reported by Israeli media. So Shuval Ben Natan, a 22-year-old Israeli reservist and West Bank settler, was killed while fighting Hezbollah last week. And this is what his brother had to say at his funeral. And, quote, "You entered Gaza to take revenge as much as possible. against women, children, everyone you saw, as much as possible. That's what you wanted. May the people of Israel be worthy of pursuing your vengeance, blood vengeance, not revenge by burning homes, trees, and vehicles, end quote. So that's how his brother is remembering him, saying, you entered Gaza to take revenge against women and children. And then a soldier who's a fellow soldier delivered a eulogy at the funeral and called Ben Natan a goofball for burning down a house in Gaza. This soldier said, quote, you were the happiest and biggest goofball in the platoon. We realized this for the first time when you set a house on fire without approval in order to boost morale, end quote. So, I mean, man. And then there was another speaker. It gets worse. There was another speaker at the funeral who fondly recalled when Ben Natan shot and killed a Palestinian who was harvesting olives with his children in October 2023. So this was in the West Bank. This speaker, who was not named, said, quote, I was so impressed by you. There were cursed olive harvesters, terrorists, and the pathetic Israeli Defense Forces didn't realize what was happening. You shoot, you talk, you drove them away, end quote. So the speaker criticized the Israeli military for arresting Ben Natan over the murder of the Palestinian olive harvester who's named Bilal Salah, and he was killed, again, harvesting his olives with his family, with children, attacked by settlers for no reason. And, you know, there are areas where they have to get approval from the Israeli military to harvest their own olives. But in this incident, this was not one of those areas. These settlers just came out of nowhere and started shooting. So this is the person who spoke at the funeral said, referring to the IDF response, quote, they're despicable. They arrested you but didn't even question the Arabs, end quote. So, and then I just mentioned something about that incident. So this happened. This was a murder that this guy did, and then after that, he went off to Gaza and he went off to Lebanon, where he was killed by Hezbollah. And I mean, these are the settlers. These are, it's just, this is their attitude, and it's just really something. Again, this is a eulogy, saying, you went in there basically ready to kill women and children. And I'm sure that he did, if that was his attitude. All right, so the next one here, Israeli minister threatens Bashar al-Assad, saying, you are in danger. So this article is from The Cradle. Israeli government minister and war cabinet member Gideon Sa'ar threatened Syria's President Bashar al-Assad on October 27th, warning that he will be in danger if his country continues to act as a conduit for Lebanese resistance movement Hezbollah. Sa'ar, who rejoined Benjamin Netanyahu's government late last month, said during a conference that Tel Aviv missed an opportunity to collapse Assad's government, which was saved by Iran and Hezbollah. Syria must not be permitted, quote, under any circumstances to be a conduit for weapons supply from Iran to Hezbollah, end quote. He went on to say that, quote, Israel must make clear to Assad that if he chooses to harm Israeli security in this matter, he places his regime in danger, end quote. He says Israel will not agree to Hezbollah's renewed buildup through Syria. Quote, removing Assad from the Iranian axis will have far-reaching consequences for Israel's security, end quote. So Israel was heavily involved in supporting extremist groups against the Syrian government at the start of the U.S.-led regime change war against Damascus, which began in 2011. Fighters from Al-Qaeda's Nusra Front were given Israeli air cover during the 2014 battles against Syrian government troops and Hezbollah. Wounded Nusra fighters were also treated at Israeli hospitals in the occupied Golan Heights. Over the past several years, Israel's Air Force has been waging an unofficial campaign of indiscriminate attacks against Syria, which aim to stifle the flow of weapons from Iran via Syria to the resistance in Lebanon. According to Lebanese analyst and journalist Khalil Nasrallah, the unofficial campaign, dubbed the battle between wars, has failed. So they have been, Israel's been bombing Syria for years and years, and they've really ramped things up since October 7th. Just recently, it seemed like there was a lot of heavy airstrikes in Damascus. So, I mean, Israel's got its eye on things, and I think that this is another area where there's always the chance of a major Israeli escalation like we've seen in Lebanon. People just don't really notice what happens in Syria much because it's kind of been just this like ongoing thing for so long. But, Israel is constantly bombing Syria, and, you see Smotrich say that Israel should go to Damascus. They want to spread the territory that far. So I'm sure that there are some people within the Israeli government that are thinking about this. There's also been these kind of little Israeli ground incursions into Syria from the occupied Golan Heights. That's happened a few times. So again, there's a chance that it could turn into something bigger. All right, so the next one here, NATO chief says that North Korean troops are deployed to Kursk. So NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte claimed on Monday that North Korean troops have been deployed to Russia's Kursk Oblast, where Ukrainian forces hold a small piece of territory and are being slowly pushed out by Russian troops. So Rutte did not say the soldiers were involved in combat, but his comments back claims made by Zelensky about North Korean troops preparing to fight in Kursk, a threat Ukraine has been hyping up to gain more support from his Western backers. Rutte previously denied Ukrainian claims that North Koreans were already fighting in the war. So also on Monday, the U.S. claimed that 10,000 North Korean troops had been sent to Russia and that a portion of them have moved closer to Ukraine. A National Security Council spokesperson said, quote, "We believe that North Korea has sent around 10,000 total soldiers to train in eastern Russia that will probably augment Russian forces near Ukraine over the next several weeks," end quote. So North Korea has previously denied that it sent troops to Russia, but Russian President Vladimir Putin did not deny the allegations about North Korean troops being sent to Russian territory when he was asked about it last week. The initial claim was that North Korean troops were already fighting in Ukraine. That's what Ukrainian officials were saying, but there was no evidence of that. NATO, Russia, the U.S. all said that there was no evidence of that. But now it does seem, Russian officials now when they talk about this, they don't confirm it, but they're not denying it. They're basically saying this is part of their new defense treaty, their new military treaty with North Korea that includes a mutual defense clause. That's Article 5. Article 4. It's Article 5 in the NATO treaty, but in this treaty, it's Article 4. So there's a quote here from Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. He was asked about all this on Monday. He was asked about, do you think the West will respond by sending troops to Ukraine? And he didn't comment directly about the allegations of North Korean troops in Russia, but he pointed to the fact that Western military personnel and mercenaries were already involved in the war. Lavrov said, quote, "There are mercenaries and so-called volunteers as well as instructors without whom it would be impossible to use not only Western-made long-range weapons, but Ukrainian long-range weapons. Without these experts and their Western satellite intelligence data, that is, which the Ukrainians obviously don't have, Ukraine's troops cannot use missiles without specialists to program the flight paths," end quote. And we do know from a German military leak that British soldiers are in Ukraine helping fire the Storm Shadow missiles. And then I just mentioned earlier this year, Russia and North Korea signed a treaty to boost military ties. Discussing that treaty, Lavrov said, quote, "It in no way violates any international law because it provides, among other things, for mutual support in case either party faces a military attack," end quote. So Zelensky and hawks in the U.S. are calling for major escalations if North Korea gets involved in the fighting. We had Mike Turner, who's the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, he's saying if North Korean troops attack Ukraine from Russian territory, then the U.S. should support the long-range strikes in Russian territory, which Putin has made clear does risk nuclear war. Turner also said if North Korean troops enter Ukraine, then the U.S. itself should consider direct military action. So this has the potential to really escalate things. And I mean, this is a big, this goes to show how this conflict is expanding and spreading, these new alliances being formed. So we'll see if things become more clear, if we start to see confirmation from Russia about what the North Korean troops are doing. All right, so the next one here, Consortium News hacked, removed from the web. So Consortium News, the website, great website. has been hacked. I'm going to just double check if it's still unavailable. Yeah, this is what comes up when you go to consortiumnews.com. This is an article from Zero Hedge about it. It says the fiercely independent investigative news source Consortium News has been taken offline following what its editor has said is a major hack following a series of data breaches. The website announced on X, quote, "Our web host has confirmed 7 recent data breaches, and now it appears that our site has been totally replaced. We have been hacked," end quote. WikiLeaks also confirmed that the website has been completely removed and current and archived historic articles are no longer accessible at this time. So Consortium News is a great news site. As I said, I mean, it was founded by Robert Parry, who unfortunately passed away in 2018. But he did so much good work on the coup in Ukraine. I mean, he did so much good stuff on Ukraine. And these are articles that I often link to, you know, for histories on these conflicts. And he was writing it, you know, in real time, covering it in real time. And then Joe Loria, who runs the site now, he's done a great job of covering the Assange case. And he also has done great stuff on Ukraine. He has this article about, you know, U.S. support for the 2014 coup in Ukraine that I often link to. So, you know, it's a site that we need to be up on the internet. So hopefully they work this out. They can figure this out and get it fixed. It's been a couple days now. I think it started on Sunday. All right, so the last one here, the U.S. okays arms sales to Riyadh following Iran-Saudi drills. So this one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So I missed this. I saw reports that Saudi Arabia and Iran were discussing doing joint military drills, but it looks like they actually did some. So last week, Saudi Arabia conducted drills with Iran in the Sea of Oman in a sign of warming relations between the regional powers. Following the announcement, the U.S. approved a major arms sale to the Gulf Kingdom. So on Thursday, the U.S. announced that it had approved the sale of 1,000 tube-launched TOW missiles to Saudi Arabia. Raytheon will be the contractor for the $440 million deal. Washington's press release about the deal came after Saudi Arabia said that it conducted joint naval exercises with Iran. A Saudi military official told AFP, quote, "The Royal Saudi Naval Forces had recently concluded a joint naval exercise with the Iranian naval forces alongside other countries in the Sea of Oman," end quote. So there's also, the U.S. also recently approved a major arms deal for Saudi Arabia, a few deals a couple weeks ago. And, you know, the idea here is, and this is kind of the big Brett McGurk plan. Brett McGurk is the top official on Biden's National Security Council, the top Middle East official, and they have this big plan to normalize for Saudi Arabia and Israel to normalize relations, and then Saudi Arabia will help rebuild Gaza or whatever. But you see Saudi Arabia and Iran, you know, they recently normalized relations, and now they're doing drills, and you know, the U.S. is they view Saudi Arabia as a potential ally in a war with Iran. But I think the Saudis and other Gulf countries have made clear that they don't want anything to do with that. The Saudis don't even want anything to do with the U.S.'s war against the Houthis now, who the Saudis were at war with from 2015 to 2022, a brutal war on par with the barbarity that we've seen in Gaza. But the Saudis have wanted nothing to do with the new U.S. bombing campaign in Yemen, yet the U.S. is still pushing through all these arms deals for them. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Jonathan Cook: Israel kills the journalists. Western media kills the truth of genocide in Gaza. One from Ted Snyder: the world's not aligning America's way. One from Brandon P. Buck: the draft is antithetical to liberty, even if it is never used. One from Joseph Solis Mullen: case study Taiwan. A nation is the story we tell ourselves. And one from Dahlia Scheidlin: Gaza is the horror that can't be denied, but Israelis will try. So please go check all of that out. Again, help us with our fundraiser if you can, or tell your friends about antiwar.com. Share this show. Like, subscribe, comment. Everything helps out. I appreciate everyone who does that. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.